We have a very special episode where we're going to be talking about what it means to be a quiet achiever. This is a Soulcast Media live event that I've been looking forward to. So I'm really thrilled you're here. Now, for those of you who are joining us for the very first time, I want to say welcome. My name is Jessica Chen, and I'm the founder and CEO of Soulcast Media, and we are a communications training company. I also have a book that came out, oh my gosh, last year, which is called Smart, Not Loud: How to Get Noticed at Work for All the Right Reasons. If you haven't had a chance to get this book, I do highly recommend it, as this book is very much anchored in a lot of the communication skills that I teach. Because I truly believe that if you want to get noticed at work for the right reasons, build a career you love, a lot of it comes down to your ability to articulate what you're doing and the impact it's making. So that's a little bit about me and my work. Now, let's get into today's conversation, which I'm so thrilled and excited to introduce my guest. Her name is Linda Raynier, and she is a leadership identity expert and the author of the book, The Quiet Achiever. Now, it is very in line with what we're going to be talking about today, and I guarantee a lot of what we're going to be sharing is going to be helping you, especially if you identify with being a quiet achiever. So, Linda, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really happy that you're here.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for having me. I know it's been a bit of a long time coming for this, so I'm super excited to be here with you too.
Yes. So I know I hinted about what we're going to be talking about today. And I also hinted that this is a new book that you have coming out, which is The Quiet Achiever. Now, before we get into any of that, if this is the first time folks are meeting you, do tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Yes. So, I my career up until now has sort of been a bit of twists and turns. It was a gradual progression, and me realizing more of who I am, and that allowed me to pivot my career. So, I started off as a CPA, traditional accounting path, stable and secure path. Growing up in an immigrant household, where I was told, work hard, put your head down, study hard, get good grades, and get a good job, and you'll live happily ever after. So I believed that. And I still do to an extent, but I've realized the reality of that more now as I'm further along in my career. And so I pursued that path. I worked at one of the big four accounting firms, realized fairly quickly that that was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So then I switched career paths, and I ended up being a recruiter slash headhunter for a few years, where I realized I really thrived in that role. I was really good at helping people with getting not only interviews, but also getting job offers. I was really good at matching people, because as a recruiter, you're supposed to hunt and look for the right talent for these companies. And I just was really good at that. And I really enjoyed it. And that was when I realized that even though I was good at finding specific individuals' jobs, I had to ignore thousands of people that were coming across my desk every single day, simply because they didn't know how to communicate their value to me. And I know you talk a lot about communication. That's the basis of what you do, which is amazing. And I felt that these people needed to learn how to communicate their value in ways that they could get jobs. So I decided, okay, this was back in 2016. I quit my corporate lucrative full-time job as a recruiter, and I decided to put myself out onto YouTube. And I put out my first few videos all about how to answer this particular interview question, tell me about yourself, that sort of thing. And back in 2016, it was me and a small handful of career coaches out there on the internet sharing what we knew. Very different from today's landscape. And my business kind of took off from there. But that was 9 years ago. And I've gone through my own internal shift since then in the last few years. So I have a family, I have children now. My identity in terms of who I feel I am now, post children, post my own personal situation, which we can talk about, family situation, has made me realize that I'm more than what I've been calling myself, which is a career coach or career strategist. And so I'm in the process of stepping into this leadership identity expert in a way, where what I'm seeing with my clients and with the audience that I have is that a lot of them have grown in their careers similar to me, and they've reached a point where they also no longer identify as the same person they were when they first started out their careers, that they're realizing that they're more than just their careers, and that there's more that they want to pursue. And so the work that I do now is really helping individuals who are at a certain place in their career where they're feeling a little bit stuck, a little bit stagnant, and wanting to learn more about who they truly are from the inside out so that they can then make the right next move, whether it is to go after that promotion or find another job or to start a business, whatever it is. I mean, it's really about a new chapter, stepping into a new chapter of self discovery and living a more authentic life and path for yourself. So that was a long winded way to kind of get you to where I am today. But
Well, I completely resonate with that. And I love what you said about how, like, the people who maybe initially have known who you are because of your YouTube channel, who they were when they first started watching you to who they are today is different. And you're also saying that you yourself and the path that you've taken, you're seeing that that's now starting to change. And of course, we have this book that's coming out or that is out, right? The Quiet Achiever. But I have to say, I completely resonate with what you're talking about because even for me, I started my career as a journalist. I was a TV journalist for over 10 years. And then similarly, I left the industry to start my own company. And over the last, 5, 7 years, I as well, got married. I have 2 young kids and, your identity starts to change and your priorities start to change, right? And I think for a lot of us, I think this must come with age where, you start looking a little bit deeper. You look a little bit deeper in terms of like, what is it that I really care about? Like, how is it that I want to lead my life? Who are the kind of people that I really want to help that you feel like you can really give the most to? And for today's episode, we're going to talk all about you and kind of like where you feel like you are today. But let's talk about the quiet achievers because it does sound like that's kind of like the audience, the need, the gap that you see that you feel probably very energized to help these folks. So what does it mean though, the quiet achievers? And I think we might have an idea, but tell us like what's the quiet achievers and what is it that you see in these folks that you feel really compelled to help them?
yes, for sure. That's a great question. I think naturally people would know what the quiet achiever is as soon as they hear sort of the two words put together. Ultimately, what I've determined quiet achiever is first of all, it's derived from high achiever. So someone who all throughout your life, you've probably been sort of that top A+ student or A student. You've worked hard, you've studied hard, you were instilled with this belief that as long as you work hard and as I said before, you work hard, you get a good job, you'll feel successful in life. And so we've been trained and programmed to believe this. And so we thrive on working hard, we thrive on getting results, we thrive on achieving our goals. At the same time, however, we're not necessarily extroverted. And that's where the quiet part comes in, is that we're not the type to be super flashy, maybe not even super, super sociable. We are friendly and we are sociable with ones that we feel comfortable, with people that we feel comfortable with. But there's this quiet aspect where we're more introverted. We prefer to keep to ourselves. We don't mind working in the background. We don't necessarily have to be the center of attention for everything. And so there's, in the world right now, there is this idea that a powerful leader is someone who is loud, who's extroverted. I mean, you know this because I know your book is all about this. It's someone who has the ability and the charisma to hold that center of attention and to be able to gain influence and lead others. And I think for those who are quiet achievers, they still have those goals of seeing themselves. They can visualize themselves holding these leadership positions or advancing in their careers. However, they don't feel that they have the innate qualities to align with that. So there's this disconnect between staying true to who they are, introverted, maybe a little bit quieter, but at the same time still wanting to achieve their goals. Another way to put it is they're ambitious introverts. And so it's just there's this disconnect between how the world views them versus how they view themselves. Because I think with what I've noticed with my clients is they know that they have the ability, if they truly worked at it, they could have the ability to gain those positions and to grow their careers, but they're feeling stuck because they just don't know what they need to do to really take on that without feeling fake. So my book, The Quiet Achiever, is to address that. And what I've come to understand is a lot of it, as much as we say it's due to our introversion and due to our desire to just keep to ourselves, what I've learned, and this is because this is based on my own journey, I've discovered that there's also a lot of insecurities that we might not be realizing we're holding on to, or fears, anxieties that don't necessarily need to be there. Because what I understand is when it comes to leadership, when it comes to stepping into that powerful, influential version of yourself, you don't have to be the loudest voice, but you do have to feel confident in who you are. And confidence doesn't come from pretending. I know as much as we've heard the phrase fake it till you make it, I really don't believe that. I feel that you have to embody it, and then you're already there. You already made it because you're embodying the version of yourself that already knows that you're valuable, that you're worthy, that you're capable, and so you're able to then open your mouth and speak the words that you want to speak, give your opinions, share your ideas in meetings in a thoughtful, uh, graceful way, rather than shying away, holding back. And so for me, it really comes down to inner confidence. It
Mhm.
comes down to your energy. It comes down to your state of being, how you view yourself, what you believe about yourself. These are all the things that I feel are not talked about enough when it comes to what quiet achievers think they need in order to become a leader. What I know they need, or what I believe they really need, because I've had to work on this myself, is working through your inner fear based beliefs and understanding yourself at a much deeper level, so that then going into a leadership role or pursuing opportunities that once felt scary to you no longer feel that scary for you, and they actually feel more natural to you because you're no longer holding yourself back by those fear-based beliefs. They've cleared. And that is my goal, and my mission is to help people to go deeper and turn inward. Because when we're experiencing feeling stagnant, feeling stuck, especially when we go through something like motherhood and we're realizing I'm not I was the type of person that fully identified with my career, my title, the way I showed up in the world, the number of followers I had, all of that. The success financially that I had, like that I made, like it was all about the external world. And going through what I've gone through, I realized that's all nice on top, but it's really about how you feel on the inside that then matters, and that's really going to determine the quality of your life and how you move about your life. Yeah. So
I no, I feel like we are speaking the same language. I really resonate with so much with what you say, and even just like, for example, like even going back to just who is a quiet achiever. I feel like as you were describing that, I was like, that's me, right? Like I felt like that's me. Like in you all, those who are watching and listening, you all know, like I tend to be more on the introverted side, which always seems so bizarre because I talk about communications, I talk about putting yourself out there, but it is because I understand how difficult it is for many of us to, again, find that inner confidence, right? I understand that struggle. And I think, like what you said, Linda, it's like a lot of it starts with the inside. And, when I think back to when I feel uncomfortable myself of whether it's public speaking. And even though I do a public speaking for a living, I often feel very scared as well. But it's not about, dwelling on being scared or feel fearful. It is truly leaning into that energy of like, I'm doing something new. I got it. It's going to be okay. And in many ways, it's like hyping yourself up. I do this all the time myself. And at the end of the day, is it perfect? No. Am I going to stumble over words? Yes. But at the end of the day, I will just feel proud of myself for having put myself out there, for having tried, right? And,
yes.
Linda, you mentioned something about how, like, a lot of quiet achievers, because that's what we're kind of talking about today, they'll sit in these meetings, they're super ambitious, they're so smart, but maybe for some reason, they're not the kind of person or people who will, like, say what's on their mind in a meeting. They'll sit in that meeting the whole time in silence, right? And I
Yes.
completely understand the struggle because I remember early on, this was me. And oftentimes, it always would come down to, I would feel intimidated for whatever reason. I'd feel intimidated by the people in the meeting, even though the people in that meeting are like on my same level. But it's something about the environment of being in a quote unquote meeting that suddenly I didn't know how to use my voice. Like as if like all the self judgment just went like 10 times, right? Oh, I shouldn't say this. Oh, it's a dumb idea, right? And then before you know it, the meeting is over. And what I realize is a lot of it is like, you really just have to like push yourself in that sense where and there are some tips that I share where like, sometimes speaking up earlier in a meeting is easier than speaking up later in a meeting. Sometimes jotting down notes of what it is that you want to say can give you that confidence. But I will say, because I do believe a lot of the people who are listening and watching, they identify with feeling intimidated or even the sense of imposter syndrome, right? Like,
Yeah.
do I am I supposed to be in this meeting? Everybody here must know so much more than me. But, like you said, I think there's a level of I deserve to be here. I know I need to be here. I know I have something valuable to add. And I think just reminding ourselves of this is very, very important.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is that sometimes though we can try to say those affirmations, I'm valuable, I'm worthy, I'm good. And there it's still and I've seen this with myself, but also with my clients that if you're not addressing why you're feeling that insecurity at such a deep level, you're not really almost attacking it. You can say all those things and try to push yourself, but the voice will come through shaky. And yes, I totally agree with you that you need to just kind of go with it, and then you'll feel better coming out of it and practice. Eventually, you'll feel natural. But there is this aspect of like really having to dig deep and asking yourself, where am I picking up this insecurity from? Why do I feel that I don't deserve or belong here? And why don't I deserve to speak up? Why do I think that my ideas aren't good?
Mhm,
That is where I love to help my clients through,
mhm.
because it's once you clear that, you actually feel different. And then the fear just doesn't necessarily come up as strongly the next time around.
Mhm. So let's talk about that. And, you're totally right in the sense where the affirmations 100% are so helpful, but it does require us to figure out where it comes from. So actually in the book Smart Not Loud, I talk about it from a more cultural perspective of growing up in a quiet culture versus loud culture. And, quiet culture are traits like you are just taught to put your head down, right? You are taught to just listen versus speak. You are taught to be more humble and modest. And those are in many ways they can be barriers. They can be barriers from us feeling that confidence. So then let me ask you, Linda. So you talked about we got to get deeper. We got to really find that. And I talked about it from a cultural perspective, but in your opinion, how do people get deeper? How do they actually identify what those barriers are from your point of view?
I mean, I think you're already hitting the nail on the head by identifying and knowing that it comes from your cultural upbringing and from how you're raised in your family. Like if your parents taught you the idea that, oh, you're speaking out of line, or you giving your opinion like that is something that you shouldn't be doing, or the way that you are so proud of yourself sounds too cocky. When you're told those things as a child and you're made to believe that it's not right to be that way, of course that's going to now as an adult interfere with how you show up. So it's really bringing awareness to that. So it can be culture, it can be family, and then it's also through your I always talk about in the book the idea of going back to your story, going back to specific moments in time where you are asking yourself, okay, I'm feeling this certain thing. Perhaps it's this level of self-doubt about the value of my ideas, like how good they are. Where, if I go trace my story backwards, if I actually travel back in time, when was I ever told, or maybe I was rejected, or I was disciplined, or I was reprimanded for sharing something that was an opinion or was an idea and being told that it wasn't good enough. I mean, if we really are willing to sit with ourselves and do that investigative work, it's a self-investigative work that we do, then we're able to then track and identify the root of perhaps where it started. But it's not enough to just say, okay, now I know where it came from and feel as though that's enough. It has to be, okay, so what did that lead me to believe? And is that still true? We have to question it, because essentially, I would say every anxiety or fear based belief is showing up in the way that it is in our lives. It keeps recurring as a pattern because it's wanting to be addressed. Because our true nature is one where we are meant to just be free and authentic and feel at ease within our bodies and speak and say things that, obviously we're not here to put others down or anything, but just be ourselves. We're really, that's our true nature. And so when we're not being our true selves, it's because we're holding on to beliefs that are coming from these micro instances, these mini moments that are now driving our behaviors and driving how we show up and our energy state and how we feel about ourselves. And if we really want to free ourselves from that, it does take time and energy and focus and willingness. That's the biggest thing. Are you willing to go back to that painful moment in time and really acknowledge that that was probably the reason why you're now here where you are at, and willing to then flip the script to say that, okay, is that still true? Is it still true that my ideas are not valuable? Is that really true, or was I just taught that? And then acknowledging, I find once you acknowledge something and really, really look at it, it starts to dissipate. Its power over you um, is not as strong because well, all it's wanting is the attention. And I can go on about this, but the idea is like it's like a crying baby. Any fears that we have is like this crying baby. When you see a crying baby, what do you want to do? You want to pick it up, you want to soothe him or her, you want to maybe feed the baby milk or give whatever he or she needs. A fear that keeps popping up in your life in terms of like this feeling of self-doubt, this feeling of anxiety, this feeling of worry about whatever, it's popping up because it's also a crying baby that needs to be soothed, that needs to be addressed. And once you address it and actually look at it and actually understand what it's wanting from you, then it just doesn't, it's not crying at you anymore. And now you can move on and you can work on other areas that are needing to be addressed.
I completely agree. It really does start with you. And, giving the analogy of a kid, because I have a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old. So I'm probably similar boat as you. But, I think about how, because my son, who's the older one, is like a toddler now and he can talk and he can argue back, and I always think about how when it first started where he would argue back with me or throw his tantrum, it was really hard for me to deal with that. And I realized a lot of it was because I was getting angry that he wasn't listening to me, right? And, as a
Mm,
parent, you're like, you have to listen to me. Where I would say something, he would like say no, right? And then it become this whole thing. But then I realized that I had to work on myself and my own emotions and my own triggers to then better help him. So, like, for example, like if he be on the ground screaming or whatever, and my instinct, right, is to be like, stop, right? Like, listen, it'd be more like, no, 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 like, it's not about me, right? It's about him and trying to understand, like, where's he coming from? And I think, I use this analogy because it just made me realize that to help other people, you have to help yourself first. That's
yes.
the most important.
Yes, exactly. And I know just before this call we were talking about energy, but I that's where I would say that ties in is that if you work on yourself and you help yourself, then your energy state is one that feels there's this pull that you have, this magnetism that I feel you would have that then others who are maybe a step or two or maybe a few steps behind you are wanting for themselves. They see that they have that ability within themselves. They just don't know how to move towards that. And so that was that is then where you can then share what you've learned and your knowledge and impart that. And so that's been the trend that I've noticed within my own self is that the things that I'm sharing are things that I've learned for myself and now I can impart that on someone else and then they can work on it through for themselves. So I completely agree.
So, yes, before we jumped on this, you and I were having a little like behind the scenes chit chat about this idea of energy. And, I was asking you all these questions about what does this mean? How does it relate to our career and being able to, look a little bit more introspectively. So, in just quickly, like, what does this mean when you talk about, energy healing? And is this even related to career? Is it related to work? How does it all come together?
Yes. Okay. So I am, and I've sort of been in a little bit in the closet. I mean, sometimes on my videos on YouTube, I would share a little bit about this other side of me. But growing up, I have always been someone that has been super sensitive, as in like woo woo. To very logical thinkers, they would think, oh, that's just woo woo. But no, I've always been very sensitive in the sense that I could sense people at a different level. Like they would say something, but I could sense that they don't actually mean necessarily what they're saying, or I could kind of tune into what they're, I don't want to say what they're thinking, but I can pick up on people's energies. And that's energy, if we were to define it, how I would define is your inner state of being. So where are you at emotionally, mentally? Like how are you feeling about yourself? And that then how does that relate to the world? And so I feel that the root of, let's say, lack of confidence and feeling as though we're not enough comes from your energy state in terms of how you're viewing yourself. That then impacts how you carry yourself, which also then impacts your communication. So, energy is the source of it all. So, it's your inner state of being and it's based on your emotions, but your emotions don't just come out of nowhere, they're based on your beliefs. So, what do you believe is true about you and about the world? And if there's a lot of self judgment going on, your energy state is going to experience that. Like you are going to experience a lot of self judgment and inner turmoil within yourself. So you're going to also identify with the external world. So if something happens in the external world that doesn't go your way, you are you are now like wrapped up in that because you don't have your own grounded sense of uh what's the word, inner energy, I guess. Like you don't have your own grounded sense of self. So energy for me is like the root of it all. If you can work on the beliefs, which then affect your emotions, that then impacts your energy or your inner state. That then impacts how you carry yourself, how you approach the world, how you interact with other people. It also interacts with your career in terms of the opportunities that you're able to attract and get, and the things that you're able to do. I see and I witness it, and I haven't really vocalized it a lot because it's really hard to talk about this, to some people. You don't know how open they are for you to tune into them and be like, this is, I believe, what's going on with you at a deeper level. This is actually the kinds of insecurities that I'm sensing that you're holding on to. I would love to do more of that, but people have to be really ready for that. And if they are, then that's when it becomes a great conversation because I'm able to then really help them work through. And once someone feels acknowledged at a deeper level and they recognize, okay, somebody else is acknowledging what I've been feeling, I haven't been able to put it to words, but someone else is putting it to words, then all of a sudden they are able to now, it feels more tangible. They can work through it. So it's a, with the whole energy thing, you have to have the willingness to tune into yourself, but then without the bit of guidance and maybe even acknowledgement from someone that can maybe acknowledge and see you, and if you're not already naturally sensitive, it can be, a bit of a deep, heavy process to work through because there's so much involved. Does that make sense?
No, it totally does. The analogy that I think about is when somebody is sick, for example, and they go to the doctors, and the doctor is giving them medicine as a band-aid to mask their symptoms, for
Yeah.
example, right? But really, what we need to do is figure out where is it coming from, right? Yes, you can take the medicine, you can put the band-aid, and you might feel better initially, right? You might, going back to work, you might be able to do that presentation, but will it ever feel easier? It may not ever feel easier unless you really try to understand where that fear, where that anxiety comes from. And yes, a lot of that has to go deeper, right? Where you have to identify your lifestyle, what you're eating, are you exercising, are you sleeping, right? All these things that are, sometimes people think like, oh, it's not as important, but that really is what causes it, oftentimes slowly. But it's only when you can change those things that you can change kind of like your lifestyle, your habits, and your health ultimately, right? So
Right,
that's what I think about.
exactly. Exactly. I mean, and I also think that it goes beyond the physical. It goes into how are you talking to yourself every day? How are you treating yourself? And are you putting yourself last in life versus putting yourself first, and not in a necessarily selfish way, but you are honoring yourself. And, when we're talking about sickness, I know this because of my own family situation where my husband got sick just a few years ago. And it really, that shifted my inner worlds, our outer and inner world, in many ways, in different ways. But it was a huge, deep awakening for me to recognize that perhaps, the things that happen, that we experience or go through, like it's not just bad luck or unfortunate that that's happening to us. If we choose to believe that there's a root reason that goes deeper than just the physical, then we will find potentially a solution. And that's, for in my case, we did with my husband. And so he's alive and well and all that when he was actually on the brink of not being here. I mean, that's a whole thing that a little bit of that I talk about in the book as well. But it does, I feel like we have to look at it from a holistic point of view. The physical, absolutely, but then the inner, the emotional is the invisible that I mean, we can go to a therapist, and, you can go to energy healers, you can go to people to help you with that. But you have to really stay on top of it and understand, what is my inner world like right now? How am I living my life on a daily basis? How do I see myself? How do I see the world? Because if it's not feeling good, then that already gives you a clue that there's opportunity for you to look into that, investigate that, and release what you don't need to hold on to.
So for those who are listening, watching, they might now be thinking, I am a bit curious now. Like I might want to figure out, the things that are holding me back. I might want to dive a little bit deeper and investigate that. So then my question for you, Linda, is for those who are now interested or at least a bit curious, what do they have to do? Is it just simply asking themselves questions, or like where do people start here?
I mean, it's a big process. So I think that's a great question. For me, to make it simple, I think we start with the currently, there's always going to be something that we're probably trying to work through or deal with or strive for or wanting to achieve at any point in our life. I mean, if we're feeling, or the opposite, where we're feeling no motivation at all, there is something going on in your physical life right now that is probably trying to send you some sort of message, whether it's you've had a job loss or you've been let go in a sense, or perhaps you're wanting to, I mean, if we're talking about careers, you're wanting to get a promotion, but they're not offering you those opportunities, or you're feeling as though the world is against you in whatever way, shape, or form. You want to look at that from an objective perspective and ask yourself, what could this potentially be telling me? Well, first of all, what am I feeling? Understand that. Then, get a little bit deeper. Get into the understanding of what could be causing why I'm feeling this way. What am I choosing to believe about this situation that is impacting my emotions on a day-to-day basis? Then you want to then also go deeper, which is where I talk about go back to your story. Where did you pick up these beliefs from? Because the thing is if we don't get to that level, this type of situation, certain people, they deal with relationships. That's their life theme is relationships. They're always maybe meeting the wrong guy or girl and they want commitment, but for whatever reason, that's not happening. I always say that if there's a pattern that's recurring in your life from a physical standpoint, then it means there's something there for you to acknowledge and understand about yourself. And it's only until we get to that root level to understand, why am I operating this way? Why am I viewing myself in the world this way? That then that situation can change. So it really starts with where you're at. You have to ask yourself, what am I experiencing right now that's really bothering me that I want to work through, that I'm ready and willing to release or move forward from? And the truth is it's not necessarily done overnight or in a 1 hour self-questioning session. It really has to do with being willing to open yourself up to potentially what the messages are. So I would say simply is to take some more time for yourself to do that inner reflection, the journaling, the meditation, if that's something that resonates with you, to take time out for yourself, to get to know yourself. And I think for quiet achievers, because we have the achiever part of us that drives us to just do, and take actions, it's very easy for us to just put ourselves last and forget about inner work, inner healing. That's not even something that I've met some clients that have never, ever even looked into for themselves, is to sit with themselves and ask themselves questions. So I would say, like, if you're really willing to, it starts with that. It starts with sitting with what's going on with me now and being willing to look at it from a slightly different perspective and start to investigate. And once you start that process, life will guide you and you will start to notice, your brain, there's certain things that get triggered and you'll start to notice the patterns more and more. And then you'll start to see it a little bit differently and you're not going to feel as much of a victim to your circumstances as you maybe once did. And then you'll eventually have the power to move out of that situation. But I mean, this is speaking from a very high level. This is how I see it from so almost like the life cycle of how this works, of inner healing and inner work. But it's going to take time and it's going to take willingness and presence
Mhm.
and a lot of tears potentially too.
Potentially. It makes me think back to when I was in that transition point of switching careers. So, like, when I was a journalist, my last stop was at the ABC station here in California. That's where I'm based. And I remember I had this, like, feeling, right? We're talking about, like, deep feelings now. Like, I had this feeling that something about staying in this industry just wasn't right for me anymore, and I think a part of it was because, and I don't think I've ever really said this, but I was passed over for this opportunity,
Mm,
and I remember feeling so sad and disappointed and angry, like, I work so hard, right? I feel like I'm going above and beyond, like, what I'm doing, and, like, why does it still feel like I'm not getting noticed at work for the right reasons, right? This hence the subtitle of my book. And for me, I realized at the end of the day that, I felt like my time was up in that sense.
yes.
I felt like my time was up with that career, which at that point was already 10 years in. And
Yes.
then so I started going deep. I started asking myself, well, then what's next, right? And I do feel like anytime any of us, step out of what is typically status quo, right? Status quo meaning like you're kind of like on this train, you're going, you're working, you're doing the thing. But then suddenly, the train stops and you're like, well, where do I go from here? And I remember thinking like, well, I feel like working on TV, working in news, like I don't think it's for me anymore. I think it was great in my 20s, which is when I did it. But now that I'm entering my 30s, I feel like it has to be different. So it took a lot of introspection, a lot of reading actually, reading books and really just trying to identify like what's going on here. And I felt like at the end of the day, like what I realized is you have to trust yourself. Like, that's just what it is. Like, that is the biggest thing that I realized. Nobody is going to do better work than you for what it is that you want to do, right? At the end of the day, you can, you hope your manager is going to see you. You hope your manager is going to give you that opportunity, which by the way, I hope you have even a good manager who's going to do this stuff for you, right? But in many ways, you are letting other people control your career and where it goes. And I feel, and this is what I realized at the end of the day, you have to control your own career. And I feel like that shift in my own mentality was so empowering because, and I think this might be in Asian culture where you kind of just go with you go in the sense where people tell you to go. You just
Yeah.
follow instructions. You do as what people tell you to do. But before you know it, you're like in this place where you're like, wait a second, like what is going on here? Like this doesn't feel right anymore. And I think because we're so, well, I'll say for myself, I was so good at following instructions that in many ways I lost myself in the process. And it wasn't until I stopped myself and asked, like, wait a second, like, this is not the life that I want to live. Like, I feel like there's something more. I feel like there's something better. And it's not about, not being satisfied. It's about knowing yourself that you can do more, but it does take stepping out of certain things sometimes. And yes, it can feel scary, but what I've realized is you yourself, like you, Linda, me, Jessica, any of us who are listening, you are the only person who's going to be able to make that happen. And I feel so energized, like when I talk about this, because some people are just so like blah, right? Like they just feel like, oh, blah in my life, in my career. And I'm just like, yes, but it's like, there's something about taking that step that once you take that step, and part of it might be the introspection that you're talking about, Linda, just identifying what's holding you back. But once you can kind of go through that exercise, I feel like the world suddenly doesn't feel like it's against you. It kind of feels like, wow, there's actually a lot of opportunities now. It's a really different way of seeing it. That's how.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I feel like I resonate with your story so much because that's exactly essentially what I went through as well when I was in the corporate world and then had to. I know I no longer want to be a recruiter. I just didn't feel as motivated anymore, even though I knew I could keep doing it for the next rest of my life if I wanted to. But it was the same idea. Like I felt like there was more. And I think that's why with Quiet Achievers, it's this sense of I know that there's more, but getting to that more, it sometimes it's something like a job loss or getting passed over or whatever it is. There's a situation, physical situation that kind of wakes you up and you're like, okay, I have to address this. But some people, they're really like, not everyone is wired the same way is what I've learned. Not all of us are. I would say I'm very sensitive, so like I can't handle suffering. Like if I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, it's like I have to figure out another way. But some people are very good at just chugging along. And I think quiet achievers, we actually have quite I guess a thick, I don't know if it's thick skin is the word, but it's this toughness that it's like, no, I'm just gonna keep chugging. I'm just gonna keep going on, even if it doesn't feel right. And it's because there's these other deep-seated again beliefs that we're telling ourselves that say no, there's reason for us to be here, but it's actually slowing us down from projecting. Like you were willing to just say, okay, I'm going to really step into this new perspective. There's a lot of individuals I'm seeing that I think the world is starting now changing. People are starting to feel differently. But up until I would say even COVID, everyone, or not everyone, but a majority of people were very much still in that mindset of like just do, just keep living life, going, work, doing all the things, checking all the boxes. And it was probably during COVID where many of us, at least from what I've heard, have gone through this inner awakening of realizing, wait, there's more. There's more for me. There's more to this world. There's more to life that I want to pursue. I need to look into it and take those little action steps, as well as doing the inner work and figuring out what it is that I truly want.
Mhm.
So I totally agree with you.
Oh my gosh. I feel like we can keep going on and on and on about this topic. I feel like we're totally speaking the same language here. And I feel like a lot of like, what you experience and what I experience is similar in that sense. And I feel like for those of you who are listening and watching, if you feel stuck, for example, right now, or you feel even a bit unhappy about a certain situation, there do not feel like this is number one, also going to be forever, right? I do think, a lot of it does have to take the ability, the willingness, and I think we talked about that earlier, the willingness to try to find something new, but above all, it's really to trust yourself. And I do think your book, The Quiet Achiever, is a great resource for people to look into, in terms of doing that more questioning, kind of looking deeper. I think that's what your book is helping folks with. And then, once you're all there, then hey, get smart, not loud, right? Because
Yes,
that's really the communications book. And it's like
yes.
once you identify like where it is that you want to go, what is it that you stand for, what is it that you want to do, then yes, communications and how do you articulate the value of it? Okay. So as we wrap up here, I feel like again we can keep going on and on, but as we wrap up here, is there any last, I call them golden nuggets, any last golden nugget you would want to tell folks, about what it is that you do, or even just like for folks who might be feeling a bit demotivated right now? Anything that you want to say to inspire them?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that there is always gold to be found in any situation, and it's more so in the tough and difficult situations, the ones that are really that we are feeling truly tested. So if that is you, where you're feeling demotivated, you're feeling like life is working against you, your career is stalling, that you don't know what's going on, that is actually a fantastic place to be because that means the world, life is telling you it is time for you to now begin stepping into this new version that you are not yet truly fully familiar with yet, but you're in a transformational stage. You're in a transition stage. You are now moving away from who you believed you once were to that elevated, more authentic, confident version of yourself. So know that it's a sign that you're moving in the right direction. It now just takes the willingness, the desire to look inward, to tune into ourselves to so that you can then trust in what you're getting and what you're receiving. Like we didn't even really talk too much about intuition, but that is a big part of what I also try to guide people through is to learn to tune into their inner voice, understand what is their inner voice asking them to look into, to research, to talk more about, or find out more about, and then take those little steps as you're being guided from an inner perspective. And you will find that next thing you know, you're all of a sudden you're no longer the same person you once were, and you're moving in the direction that you truly want to go because ultimately it's your heart that guides the way. Your brain is secondary. Your brain listens to what your heart wants and will execute and help you figure out and analyze ways to get there. But it's your heart that I feel if you are willing to tune into your heart space, listen to that inner guidance, you will then be led to what you're really meant to do, what you're here for.
I love this conversation so much because it is a little different from a lot of the conversations that I typically have, which is, all about tactical communication skills. Okay, folks, what do you say? How do you say it, right? But I do find this conversation super refreshing because I do think it's important for us to sometimes pause and look a little bit deeper. And I think that's what this conversation allows people to think about. And, for those of you who are listening and watching, I hope this episode was inspiring as well, where you're like, wow, it was really enjoyable listening to Jessica and Linda talk about this. Yeah, now I do want to maybe spend some quiet time, go on that walk around the neighborhood and just kind of digest, right, what it is that we're talking about. So, Linda, how can folks get in contact with you? Where can they purchase the book?
Yes, absolutely. So the Quiet Achiever is available, I think, anywhere that books are available. Amazon, Barnes and Noble. In Canada, it's on Indigo or in Indigo. So absolutely, anywhere there. You can also purchase it from my website. And then if you wanted to connect with me further, you can watch my videos on YouTube. Linda Raynier is the YouTube channel where I talk about this type of stuff. And then I also have my website, lindaraynier.com.
Well, thank you, Linda, so much for joining us. And for those of you who tuned in, we're so grateful for you. I host these events once a month or so, but the best way for you all to get tuned in and get alerted is go to the website soulcastmedia.com/events and RSVP, get on our email list because that's how we notify you of all our upcoming events. And I can tell you they're all gold, just like this one here today. So with that, I appreciate you all. And if you and I already are not connected, Do connect with me as well on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. And of course, I look forward to staying in contact with you. And Linda, thanks so much for joining us today. Take care.
Great.